I am a little bit. But anyway, it was a little later than that.
I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't like odd that he was out at that time.
Not really, no. No, it was, yeah. And the next morning, a couple of tourists were driving by, and they spotted the car.
So that was the first discovery?
That was the first people who at least reported it, yeah. They spotted the car, and they stopped. The husband, their names were Alan and Barbara Crow. They were from Australia.
And this is 10 o'clock in the morning,
Right around 10, yeah. So Alan Crow walked down to the car, saw that there was a person in it, and he opened the door and took Willie's pulse, found that he did have a pulse, kind of weak, but he was otherwise non-responsive. And but then, as it happens, another car drove by, so they flagged down this other car, which luckily enough was driven by a person named Dorothy Messer, who happened to be a doctor. And here's another amazing coincidence. There was also a passenger in the car named David Coots, who was a member of the SNP, or the same party that Willie belonged to.
Yeah,
actually,
they knew each other.
Yeah, he had known Willie for years. And so when he was kind of shocked and surprised to see Willie sitting behind the wheel of the car that was wrecked. Or maybe it wasn't. Was this a coincidence, or was he a hitman?
You're way ahead for that.
Yeah,
well, we could just start right now.
Yeah, we'll save the accusations for
I don't think we should. There's more story to tell.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, there is, yeah. And actually, I saw this guy on TV in an interview. He doesn't come off like a mob thug or a hitman at all.
Also, it was, 12 hours later.
Yeah, there was that, too, yeah.
And the interview was much later than that.
Yeah, years after. So they get down to the car. That's when David Coots recognizes Willie. Willie was in the driver's seat unconscious. He was not wearing a seatbelt. And Dr. Messer looked him over and guesstimated he'd been sitting there for maybe around 10 hours. But it's hard to, I don't know how she did that. Maybe blood clotting, because he had like a head injury, as we know.
Yeah, there was blood all over. It was pooled down his shirt.
Yeah, and so I guess that's how she guesstimated this. So he's taken to a hospital in Inverness, and from there he was transferred to another hospital, which was the Aberdeen Royal Infirmary. And there at Aberdeen, right around 4 in the afternoon, they discovered, finally, that he had a bullet hole in his head just over his right ear.
How long does it take to wipe the blood off of somebody's head, for God's sake?
I don't really quite get why it took so long to figure that out, but, hey.
I think, you're doing triage for other stuff, right? If somebody says, well, he has a pulse, you assume if there was a doctor on the scene as well, you assume maybe she would have been noticing things. If he has a pulse, clearly he's not brain dead.
Yeah.
Well, I would presume that he was brought in an ambulance, so I would assume that they would have given him a once-over and said, clean it and bandage it, would be my presumption.
Right, but life-saving care is different than finding a bullet hole behind somebody's ear.
Listen, I watched ER for years, and that's not the way it happened.
Well,
yeah.
You know that I know a little more than that.
Hey,
yeah.
I got one word to say to you guys. Stat.
Yeah, clear.
Stat. Clear. Stat. Okay, back to, it might have.
But yeah, they should have found it faster, but also.
Well, I would have thought.
It's not that crazy to me, I guess.
I don't know. The guy comes in with a head injury, and I would think the first thing he would do would be like x-ray his head to see if he's got any, massive like brain swelling.
I'm afraid that we're right back to exactly what Devin was saying.
I guess. I don't know. But anyway, whatever. It's water under the bridge, right? Or water under the car, I guess, in this case.
Burn under the car?
Yeah, I know. When they found a bullet hole, they x-rayed his head. There was a bullet in his brain. So while that changes things, it turns out it wasn't an auto accident after all. But the local police apparently didn't get the memo on that, so his car was towed from the scene at noon the next day. And so
which would have been Sunday?
Sunday, yeah, I believe it was about noon on Sunday the 7th of April.
By the way, can I point something out? Because people will see this when they're reading this on the internet, and it was confusing to me at first until I figured out what the problem with the reporting was.
Yeah.
Is sometimes you will see it reported as he left on Friday, and he wasn't found until Sunday.
Uh-huh.
And it took me forever to figure out that what happened is people were mixing up the date that the car was hauled away as the date that Willie was found. In other words, not 12 hours of him being gone.
36
but
hours.
36 hours. And I was like, it really took me a long time to because I kept reading the different articles and I couldn't understand. And then that's the only way I determined that the screw-up happened.
Yeah, no, I don't think the 87 road is that remote.
No.
I don't think it was quite that remote, but nobody would have seen it for that long a time.
So anyway, so they go back. They're at the car. They're hauling the car away.
Yeah, the car has been hauled away, so they didn't see it as a potential crime scene at first. They thought it was a car accident. This guy had just gone off the road, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not the first time that's happened. And as for the car itself, that was, of course, in the police's possession. There were three things that were not in it: the gun that shot Willie, his briefcase, which supposedly he had with him, and also that bottle of whiskey that he supposedly took with him. Those things were not in the car. They hadn't been found on the ground around the car either. So this is one of the things that I found really odd about this story. So the local police, after they found out that it was a crime scene, at least potentially, they took the car back to where the wreck was and put it back in the same spot where they found it so they could take pictures of it.
That's kooky.
Well, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. They should have already taken pictures of it anyway, I would have thought. Apparently they didn't, so they put the car back, and they searched the area, and this time they found the gun. It was about 60 feet from the car, and it was in the burn, which you remember is a stream, and it was kind of below a little tiny waterfall in the burn, which may be why nobody spotted it at first. And it was a .45 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver, which had been fired twice.
How do you know? As in there were just 2 bullets missing, or
there were two
empty
empty cartridge casings. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which means that it had been. All it means is that obviously it was fired once because he had a bullet in his head.
Well,
but the other one.
If that was his actual gun, but yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That too,
But I just sometimes it seems like.
Yeah.
People say it's been fired twice, but like we've talked about this before. Sometimes you don't get your.
You don't know that. You
don't get your gun all the way full.
Yeah. Well, no.
Well, no. It had empty brass in it.
Yeah.
Two empty brass cases.
So it was a 7-shot
because it's a revolver.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so.
Maybe you forgot it.
Yeah.
Maybe
well.
Empty it out.
Well, I think Joe's idea is right though, is that he may have shot it once at some point and left it. I mean, because you don't always just open it up and replace him. It's not like the video game where as soon as you can, you reload.
Yeah, well, you think you would, but the thing about it is this gun. And by the way, I mentioned it was a .45 caliber Smith & Wesson. That's what's on Wikipedia and in some other places too. It turns out that's not what it was.
Yeah, it seems like it would have been a pretty noticeable bullet hole.
You would think that somebody would have noticed that big old bullet hole a lot.
It would have done a hell of a lot of damage, like missing skull damage.
Yeah, like the other side of the skull blasted away.
Right.
Yeah, the bullet would probably not be rattling around in his skull.
Yeah, probably gone up the other side. Yeah, the one that they found was actually a very old Smith & Wesson. It was called the first issue, the first model revolver. It was called that because it was the very first gun that Smith & Wesson ever made.
Okay.
It was made around the time of the American Civil War.
So it's old.
Very old antique gun. And it was a single-action revolver, 7 shots, chambered in .22 short, which is about the most anemic round you can think of. A very anemic little small round.
Sorry, you said that on a lot of sources it says it's a .45, but you know it's something else. How do you know that?
Well, number one, there was actually what I thought was a fairly comprehensive article in one of the Scottish papers about it. And they actually had a picture of the revolver.
Okay.
And
that's helpful.
And so I'm not an expert on Smith & Wesson antique revolvers by any means, but I did a little Googling on antiques. I found a website where all these things were up for auction, and there were quite a few of those old first model ones out there. And I compared the photos very carefully, and they looked absolutely identical. They were, and I did a little research. It was indeed the first one. It was a 7-shot revolver, just like this thing in the story was.
Okay.
And then beyond that story, the official inquiry was also quoted in a few places too. It was conducted,
and they mentioned
it was a 22. They didn't say what the model was.
Well, but they don't call it a 22. They call it a .22.
A .22.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, aren't there different namings for the size of calibers in different countries? Is that inaccurate?
Some of them can be.
It depends.
Yeah, I think
it depends on them, but I think because of the age of this gun, it was pretty well established. It's just that we call it a 22. They call it a .22. But if you buy a box of 22 caliber rounds here, it's got that decimal point is there.
It does say .22. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was looking at a box yesterday.
So I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, and
we do indeed know that it was actually a much smaller.
It was a much smaller round, yeah, and this would explain, I think, the empty cartridge casing that was in there, because this was a lot of the really old single actions. They didn't have a safety notch or anything in the hammer, and so when the gun was fully loaded, your hammer was resting on the primer of a hot round.
Right.
And so if you drop the gun or if something just fell on your gun and whacked the hammer, it could go off and maybe shoot you in the leg.
So it was maybe a safety precaution that you'd have one just empty shell
Yeah,
casing?
you'd either leave that whole thing empty, or you'd put a piece of a brass casing in there. And so that's probably what he did, is he just put an empty shell casing in there to put his hammer down on.
Gotcha.
That's what I think, but I'm not totally sure when we're pure supposition. But yeah, I would not personally carry that gun with the hammer down on a live round myself. So that was apparently, I don't know where he got that from. It might have just been in the family for years.
Who knows?
But he apparently, according to friends, had that gun for a long time. And some people said he had started carrying it for personal protection.
And it was his gun.
Apparently, it was his gun. Yeah, but it wasn't registered. That's the thing about Europe is, like, it's supposedly a gun-free area, but it just seems like a lot of people have these old guns just lying around. Yeah, you know what I mean?
I'm trying to remember when the big push to get guns out of the British Isles were, and I believe it was after this.
But, yeah.
Well, I believe it was after this, but it was right around the same time. Like, I mean, it didn't. The entire country did not go gunless right away. It took quite a few years for that to take effect.
Yeah, no, I mean, the big push to really get rid of every single gun took place after this. That was after the big Dunblane massacre in Scotland.
So it's not crazy that he had a gun.
Oh no, not at all.
It's not like if it was today. What was the last prime minister? Is it David Blaine? Was that his name?
Who's
David
that?
Cameron?
Thank you, David Cameron.
Oh, yeah.
I am good with names today.
Yeah, you are.
David Blaine is the dumb magician guy.
See? Same thing to me.
Anyway.
Politics and magicians. But it's not as crazy as suddenly saying, oh, he had one.
Yeah.
That's my point.
I was just wanting to make sure that it was his gun.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That it wasn't somebody else's gun. So let's...
Yeah, we're 20 minutes in.
Let's not move on. We're kind of
getting
the drift here, yeah. Let's see. So something else they found at the scene of the accident, they found a small pile of torn up papers. These were found by David Coutts, remember him?
Yeah.
That was on the day they came across the wreck, and that was between the road and the car, about 25 feet away from the car, towards the road. And he said that it looked like Willie's wristwatch was also on this pile. So it's kind of a neat pile of torn up papers with the wristwatch.
Which is weird.
Which is a little odd. And so I don't know how exactly they got there, if they fell from the car during the wreck, or if Willie's murderers put that stuff there. I really don't know. If Willie was murdered, that is, of course. After that, the inquiry into Willie McRae's death was kind of minimal. It was just assumed that it was suicide.
Because after they found the bullet in his brain, they tried to figure out what to do. He died shortly thereafter, obviously.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, you didn't say that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I overlooked that. Yeah, he was in a coma. His life support was turned off on Sunday, April 7th, and he died.
Mm-hmm.
And as we know...
Yeah, I mean, obviously he sustained a lot of brain damage and swelling and all the bad things that come of that.
Well, yeah, and that's, one of those things, like if you get medical attention pretty quickly after that happens, you have
a good chance
to survive sitting there for 12 hours.
Not helpful, yeah. I mean, I lost a lot of blood, and your brain needs blood to survive.
It does.
Turns out.
It's weird.
Yeah, kind of funny the way that works.
Also needs to not have a bullet in it.
Yeah, that's a good point, too. It was ruled a suicide because it seems so open and shut. But this case lives on in Scotland. I mean, even today, there's a Kickstarter campaign out there right now by a guy who wants to write a book about this. He's doing a little fundraising just to raise the funds so he can write this book about it. There have been songs written about it, TV specials about it, tons and tons of newspaper articles, lots of conspiracizing. It's kind of almost like Scotland's JFK. Obviously, but it's still, to a lot of people, it's kind of a big story. A lot of suspicions out there. And in fact, in about 2 years after the death, Winnie Ewing rose to be president of the SNP in 1987. She actually knew Willie herself. At the request of many in the party, she launched her own investigation into Willie's death. And her conclusion was that she couldn't conclude anything. She said the Crown Office actually refused to share most of their files with her. She said she was basically stonewalled, and in the end, she just couldn't say for sure what happened. She didn't accuse anybody of murder, but she just said she couldn't definitively say that Willie really did commit suicide.
Okay.
Because she just didn't have the evidence. And the reluctance, of course, of the government to share their information, whatever they had, and naturally aroused a lot of suspicions.
Well, I mean...
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the cops defended themselves because they put the car back, and then they said, "Oh yeah, we found it this far away from the car because we're pretty sure." Hey, Tommy, is this where the car was? I'm pretty sure it's where it was. I mean, that just opens up a whole bag of worms.
I was just gonna say, reluctance to share information sometimes just means that they did not do a good job of collecting information.
It might have been.
So they just didn't have anything to share.
Well, it might have been. Well, and we'll get into this a little bit later too, but it does appear that Willie was involved with, the nationalist cause, and
he's involved in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he was, and so he probably was under at least a small degree of surveillance. And they probably had a file on him, just like the three of us have FBI files on us. Probably
his file was probably not nearly as large as ours, though.
Probably not. And so it might have been that they just didn't want to open up, MI5 files or special branch files to the SNP, and so that might have been the whole reason. Not that there was any skullduggery. Another sort of suspicion, when we're talking about why people are suspicious, is where the gun was found. It was found 60 feet from the car, which is a little odd, you got to admit. And it didn't have any fingerprints on it. Did I mention that?
No.
Yeah. But of course, as I said, the police say they returned the car to the scene. This came out in an article, I think in 2015. Again, this is still in the news. There's still new stuff coming out. And it turns out that this article in 2015 that was fairly carefully documented. They said that police put it back, but they don't believe they got it back in the exact precise spot where it was before.
The car or the gun?
The car.
Okay.
The gun
like
was
a mile or something?
No, not a mile. Well, some they said it was off by a mile, but in this case they brought it back to the same spot, but they were just off by 50 or 60 feet.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the gun they did not find.
20 meters?
About 20 meters, 19 meters. And so when they actually put the car back, they took lots of photographs. Now they were treating it as a crime scene, so they actually searched the surrounding area pretty thoroughly too. That's when they found the gun in the stream. Probably actually just fell out the driver's side window into the burn and sat there undetected. It wasn't spotted because it was underwater.
Well, Coots says that it couldn't have been underneath the car where it originally sat, though.
Well, he didn't say definitively there's absolutely no way. He said, wow, that just seems really unlikely. That's kind of more his tone.
Well, he was there. He was standing next to it. He was looking down. There was the whole policeman lost his hat thing.
Yeah, he said that, the police was pulling his body out of the car and his hat fell off into the burn, and Coots bent over and picked up the hat and gave it back to the cop.
Right.
And apparently the hat fell right about where the gun should have been.
Right, which makes it kind of questionable if it really was in the spot they say it was. There's all kinds, but it's moving the car just screwed the whole thing up. So
it kind of did.
I don't want to go too far down that.
It kind of did.
Yeah, but I will just, I feel like I need to remind people that the crash you described is the car flipped over a number of times, right?
Yeah.
So things could have actually been
flown out. They could have been flung out. Yeah, that's true too.
So
that's true too.
If assuming that the gun was fired or whatever before the car came to rest, it could have gone flying much further.
That's the tricky part, is when was the gun fired? And there was actually one of the policemen that was involved in this said years later that it appears that he actually shot himself while driving down the road and then went off the road, and that would explain what happened, because the car rolled and it fell out. But
that sounds like a theory.
That sounds like a theory. I'm not so sure about him shooting himself while driving, but maybe, I don't know. So that's all the suspicions. Have I left anything out that you guys could think of?
No, I think you pretty much hit all of it.
All right, so now it's time for us to get into hypotheses.
Theories.
Oh, theories, okay.
Nobody calls it hypotheses.
Are you kidding? I know. Who would do that?
This isn't science.
Yeah, this is the internet, yeah. Better than science. Before we get into all of our theories or hypotheses, let's take a quick break.
Support for today's episode comes from Grove. Grove is the e-commerce company that makes it easy to discover the best natural products to take care of your home and family, and to make sure you never run out of your favorite things. With their own safe, effective, and affordable Grove flagship products, as well as the amazing brands like Mrs. Meyer's, Methods, 7th Generations, Tom's, Real Simple, and Gads more, Grove curates premium quality products that are natural, beautiful, and sustainable. And then they deliver everything right to your door when you want it. And better yet, they offer free shipping and free returns, no questions asked. And their Grove guys, who are awesome by the way, are also available to answer questions or to add items to your next order if you run out. Personally, I use Grove. We get it here at the house. I really dig that they have Mrs. Meyer's because I didn't realize what a great soap it was, because I don't wash my hands and then go, ooh, I smell like a bag of perfume. I don't even know perfume came in a bag, but apparently that's what it does. But regardless, I don't reek of those smells, and I really like it.